Hello and welcome to Still Wargaming and another DreadBall Xtreme painting tutorial. In this video I'll be showing you how to paint the second team that you get in DreadBall Xtreme, the Khalysi team. I'll be showing you how to paint them step by step using paints from the Army Painter's War Paint range. However, if you are a fan of the Games Workshop Citadel range, I'll be kind of including a conversion chart in the description below. So once you've removed any mould lines and cleaned up the model, it's time to base coat it. For this I've used ash grey, however you could also use the uniform grey. If you haven't got access to an airbrush, use uniform grey in a spray can. I've gone for ash grey as it's slightly lighter and it gives a much better kind of overall starting tone for the rest of the miniature. With the base coat completed, the first area we're going to be looking at is the armour, and for this we'll be base coating in Chaotic Red. Once you have a nice and even covering of Chaotic Red, we're going to be doing the first layer, which will be Dragon Red. Just make sure that you can still see the darker Chaotic Red in the recesses of the armour. In order to help blend together the base coat and the layer, we're going to be using a red tone quick shade ink across the armour sections. With the ink wash dried, we're going to be doing a highlight of Toxic Boils. Now this paint is from the Zombicide paint set, however if you don't have access to this, you could use Alien Purple mixed with a little bit of matte white. We'll be applying this colour to the very tips and the edges of the armour. Make sure that you don't use too much of this as you'll make the armour look too pink rather than red. So now that the armour is completed, we'll be moving on to the skin. Now for the base layer of this we'll be using Wolf Grey. It's good to kind of get a nice and thin down layer of this and apply a few of them to get a nice and even coverage across the skin areas. With the base coat achieved, we're going to be doing the first layer, which will be a Wolf Grey and Ash Grey mix of 50-50 quantities. Make sure that you see the Wolf Grey still showing through on the recesses, so just pick out some of the features with this colour. The next layer will be Ash Grey. Now this should be thinned down to get a nice and even coverage on the skin, and it also gives like a nice blending as well. Pay particular attention to facial features and also kind of the definition on the abs as well. The final task for the skin is to apply the tattoos. Now I'm going to be using Ultramarine Blue, however you could use a darker colour if you wanted to. Use a thin brush and, as before, make sure it's nice and thin down and do a few layers as it will make it much easier to apply the tattoos. The next area we'll be looking at are the bandages, and for this we'll be base coating with Monster Brown. In order to provide a little bit of depth with the bandages, we'll be using a quick shade soft tone ink wash across them. Once the wash is dried, you'll be picking out the bandages with Desert Yellow. Try to use a thin brush for this and kind of focus more on the upper edges of the bandages for the best effect. The final step for the bandages is to apply a very thin highlight of skeleton bone to the top edges. Make sure you thin it down as it will allow you to get a much thinner edge. So now it's time to move on to the hair, and for the base coat we'll be using Alien Purple. Once the base layer is dried, we'll be applying a highlight to the upper parts of the mohawk, and for this we'll be using Toxic Boils. But as I said earlier, if you don't have access to this, you could also use Alien Purple mixed with some matte white. In order to pick out some of the individual hairs, we'll be using a purple tone quick shade ink wash across the hair. The final step for the hair is to apply a 50-50 mix of matte white and Toxic Boils. Now this will just need to be applied to the very tips of the hair, as you only kind of want to have like a nice and even gradient across them. The only remaining step now is to do the eyes and also the kind of glowing disc which is on the forearm. For this we'll be base coating with Desert Yellow, and if you do attempt to tackle the eyes, make sure you use a very thin brush. Once your base coat is dried, a soft tone quick shade ink wash will actually kind of give a nice depth to the colour. The next step is to apply a demonic yellow highlight. Now you don't want to cover the whole area here, but maybe just kind of a part of a crescent will create like a nice glowing effect. The final step is to apply a couple of small dots of matte white to kind of enhance that glowing effect. And there we have your completed Khalysi team member. While this tutorial focused mainly on the striker, you could also use these same techniques for painting the jacks as well. If you enjoyed this tutorial, let us know in the comments, and also hit the subscribe button to be kept up to date with our latest videos. We also have a number of other DreadBall related tutorials and also a DreadBall Xtreme Convicts tutorial as well. Thanks for watching and goodbye.